The Hollow Choir. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door of Mara's apartment like an afterthought. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a wax stamp that bore no insignia, just a faint spiral that seemed to turn inward the longer she stared. Her name, Mara Elise Cantrell, was written in spidery ink, the kind that looked like it had been scratched out by a quill in a hurry. There was no return address, no postmark, just the envelope, untouched and cold to the touch, as if it had been carried through a freezing night. Mara stood in her narrow hallway, the bustle of the city outside her window muted by the weight of the moment. She turned the envelope over, her fingers brushing the wax. It felt strangely soft, almost pliable, like skin. She shivered, even though the apartment was warm. The sensible thing would be to throw it away. Unmarked letters were rarely good news, but curiosity gnawed at her. She slid a knife under the flap, careful not to tear the paper, and pulled out a single sheet. The handwriting matched the envelope, sharp and deliberate. It read, "Dear Ms. Cantrell, you are cordially invited to attend a private performance at the Hollow Choir Estate, located at the edge of Blackthorn Wood. The event will begin at midnight on October 13th. Your presence is requested to witness a rare and unique experience. Transportation will be provided. Please bring only yourself and an open mind. Answers are not required. We will know." Below the text was a crude map, hand-drawn in the same ink. It marked a route from the northern edge of the city to a place Mara had never heard of, Blackthorn Wood. The map ended with a sketch of a house, its windows drawn as hollow, staring eyes. No signature, no phone number, no explanation of what the Hollow Choir was or why she of all people had been invited. Mara placed the letter on her kitchen counter, where it seemed to glow faintly under the fluorescent light. She was a nobody, 32, single, a freelance graphic designer who rarely left her apartment except for coffee runs. She had no ties to estates or choirs or forests. Yet the letter felt personal, as if it knew her in a way she didn't. She tried to dismiss it. She made coffee, answered emails, sketched a logo for a client. But her eyes kept drifting to the envelope. At dusk, she Googled Hollow Choir Estate and Blackthorn Wood. Nothing. No records, no mentions, not even a stray forum post. It was as if the place didn't exist. She called her friend Lena, who laughed it off as a prank, but sounded uneasy when Mara read the letter. "Don't go," Lena said. "It's creepy. What kind of invitation doesn't let you RSVP?" Mara agreed, but sleep eluded her that night. She dreamed of a forest where the trees whispered her name, their branches curling like fingers. When she awoke, the letter was on her nightstand, though she was sure she'd left it in the kitchen. By the 12th, she decided not to go. She burned the letter in her sink, watching the paper crumble to ash, the wax dripping like blood. But at 11 p.m. on the 13th, a black car idled in front of her building. Its windows were tinted, its engine silent. The driver, a tall figure in a hooded coat, stood motionless by the open door. Mara's heart pounded. She hadn't told anyone she was leaving. She hadn't even packed. Yet her coat was on, her shoes laced, and her hand on the doorknob. The drive was long, the city lights fading into a sea of dark pines. The driver never spoke, never turned. Mara clutched her phone, but the screen showed no signal, just her reflection, pale and wide-eyed. The car stopped at a wrought iron gate, its bars twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. Beyond it loomed a house, massive, Gothic, its windows black as voids. The driver opened the door and Mara stepped out, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. A woman waited at the entrance, her face obscured by a lace veil. "Ms. Cantrell," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "You are expected." Mara hesitated. What is this place? Why am I here? The woman tilted her head as if the question amused her. To listen, she said. To become. Before Mara could ask more, the woman turned and slipped inside. Mara followed, her footsteps echoing off the marble floor. The foyer was vast, lit by chandeliers that flickered without bulbs, their light casting shadows that moved independently. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' eyes scratched out, their mouths painted in crude red smiles. The woman led them to a set of double doors. From beyond them came a sound, not music, not quite singing, but a low, resonant hum that vibrated in Mara's chest. It was beautiful and wrong, like a lullaby sung by something that didn't understand sleep. The doors opened to reveal a circular room filled with people, dozens, perhaps hundreds, standing in concentric rings. They wore simple gray robes, their faces hidden in shadow. In the center was a dais, empty except for a single chair. Take your seat, the woman said, pointing to the chair. Mara's legs moved before her mind could protest. She sat down, the wood cold against her skin. The humming grew louder, sharper, piercing her thoughts like a needle. The robed figures began to sway, their movements synchronized, their hands rising in unison. Mara wanted to run, but her body felt heavy, her eyelids drooping. The hum became words, though she couldn't understand them, words that felt like they were being carved into her bones. And then she saw it, a shape in the shadows, vast and formless, its edges pulsing like a heartbeat. It wasn't in the room, not exactly. It was behind her, beneath her, everywhere. The robed figures turned toward her, their faces still hidden, and the hum stopped. Silence pressed against her eardrums. Welcome, they said as one, their voices a chorus of whispers. Mara screamed, but no sound came out. Mara awoke in a bed that was not hers, the sheets damp with sweat. The room was small, windowless, its walls papered with a faded pattern of vines that seemed to writhe in the dim light of a single candle. Her clothes were gone, replaced by a gray robe identical to those worn by the figures in the circular room. Her phone, her keys, her identity gone. Panic clawed at her throat, but when she tried to scream, her voice was a rasp, as if she'd been screaming for hours. She stumbled to the door, her bare feet cold on the stone floor. It was unlocked, opening into a hallway lined with identical doors, each marked with a spiral like the one on the wax seal. The air was heavy, scented with the same sickly sweetness she noticed outside the house. She called out, her voice echoing unanswered. The silence that followed was worse, not empty, but alive, like the pause before a predator strikes. Mara chose a direction and walked, her robe brushing her ankles. The hallway stretched on, its walls adorned with more portraits, their scratched-out eyes seeming to follow her. She passed a mirror, its surface clouded, and caught a glimpse of her reflection. The face was hers, but the eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, like holes punched in a mask. She looked away, her heart pounding. At the end of the hallway was a spiral staircase. She descended, the steps uneven, the air growing colder. The hum from the night before, or was it still night? Returned, faint but insistent, vibrating in her teeth. It pulled her forward, a bond she couldn't break. The staircase ended in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In its center stood a stone altar, carved with spirals that pulsed faintly, as if illuminated from within. Around it stood the robed figures, heads bowed, hands clasped. They didn't acknowledge her, but she felt their attention, a weight on her skin. The veiled woman from the entrance appeared, gliding out of the shadows. "You have heard the first note," she said, her voice curling like smoke. "The chorus is incomplete without you." Mara backed away, her heels hitting the steps. "I don't belong here. Let me go." The woman's veil shifted, revealing a glimpse of her face, pale, eyeless, her mouth a thin slash. "You have been chosen," she said. "The choir sings for the hollow, and the hollow hungers." Mara turned to run, but the robed figures moved, their movements fluid, unnatural. They formed a circle around her, their hands joined, their humming increasing. The sound was sharper now, cutting into her thoughts, unraveling them. She saw flashes, memories that weren't hers. A child crying in a dark room, a hand reaching out from a grave, a sky full of stars screaming. She fell to her knees, clutching her head. "Stop!" she gasped. "Please!" The humming faded but did not stop. The veiled woman knelt beside her, her veil brushing Mara's cheek. "You cannot leave," she said. "But you can choose how you sing." Mara's vision blurred, tears streaming down her face. "What are you?" The woman didn't answer. She stood and gestured to the altar. The robed figures parted, revealing a path. Mara's body moved without her consent, her feet carrying her to the altar. She lay down, the stone freezing against her back. The spirals glowed brighter, their light seeping into her skin. The humming became a song, wordless but alive, filling her with a warmth that was both comforting and terrifying. She saw the shape again, the huge, shapeless thing from the circular room. It was closer now, its edges sharper, its presence a pressure in her chest. It wasn't a creature, not exactly, it was absence, a void that longed to be filled. The psalm was its voice, the choir its instrument. Mara felt herself slipping away, her thoughts dissolving into the music. She became part of it, herself eroding like sand in a storm. But something inside her resisted. A memory, her mother's laugh, the smell of rain on her childhood street anchored her. She clawed her way back, her nails digging into the altar. The song faltered, the robed figures swaying as if struck. The veiled woman hissed, her veil falling away completely. Her face was a void, a black expanse where features should have been. Mara rolled off the altar and hit the ground hard. She ran, the humming following her, the hands of the figures grasping at her robe. She reached the stairs, her breath ragged, and climbed up, not daring to look back. The hallway was different now, the doors open, revealing glimpses of other rooms, people in gray robes, their faces blank, their mouths moving in silent song. She found a door leading outside, the night air sharp and real. The black car was gone, the gate open. She ran into the forest, the trees closing around her like a cage. The hum followed, faint but persistent, woven into the wind. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Behind her, the house loomed, its windows glowing with the same sickly light. And in the distance she heard it, a single, clear note, sung by a voice that was almost hers. The forest was endless, a maze of gnarled trees and shadows that seemed to shift when Mara wasn't looking. Her robe caught on thorns, tearing at the hem, but she didn't stop. The hum was still there, a faint pulse in her ears, sometimes fading, sometimes swelling like a tide. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, burrowing into her mind, whispering things she couldn't quite hear. Her bare feet bled, leaving smears on the moss, but the pain was distant, drowned out by fear. She didn't know how long she had been running. Hours, maybe days. The sky never changed, a gray veil that hid the sun or the stars. Her throat burned with thirst, but there were no streams, no signs of life, only the trees and the humming. She tried to think, to plan, but her thoughts were slippery, interrupted by flashes of the altar, the veiled woman's eyeless face, the huge form that wasn't there but was everywhere. Eventually she stumbled into a clearing. In its center was a stone well, its rim carved with the same spirals she'd seen in the house. The hum was louder here, rising from the well like heat. Mara approached, drawn despite herself. The water below was black, rippling without wind. She leaned over, and her reflection stared back, not her face, but the face in the mirror, with hollow eyes and a mouth that moved silently. She recoiled and fell to her knees. The humming became words, fragmented and sharp. Sing. Becoming. Hollow. She covered her ears, but the sound was inside her, vibrating in her bones. The ground shook, and from the well came a low, wet sound, like something climbing. Mara scrambled to her feet and ran, the clearing disappearing behind her. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, their branches brushing her face like hands. She saw things in the corners of her eyes, shapes that moved too smoothly, too silently. They wore gray robes, their faces hidden, but she knew they were the choir, or something worse. They weren't following her, but they were always there, just out of reach. She found a path, narrow and overgrown, that led to a wooden bridge over a dry riverbed. The bridge was old, its planks warped, but it was the first sign of human hands since the house. She crossed it, each step creaking, the hum fading. On the other side was a village, or what was left of it. Houses stood in ruins, their roofs collapsed, their windows boarded up. The air smelled of ash and decay, and the spirals were everywhere, carved into doors, painted on walls, etched into the ground. Mara entered the nearest house, its door hanging off its hinges. Inside was a single room, the walls covered with photographs. They were old, sepia-toned, of people in gray robes, their faces scratched out. Some were holding instruments, flutes, drums, things Mara didn't recognize, but their hands were wrong, too long, too many fingers. In the center of the room was a table, and on it was a book. The book was bound in leather, its cover embossed with a spiral. Mara opened it, her hands shaking. The pages were filled with writing, the same spidery script as the letter. It was a record, a list of names and dates going back centuries. Next to each name was a single word. Some. Her own name was there, near the end, with no date, but the same word. Some. She dropped the book and stepped back. The buzz increased and the photographs on the walls began to move, the scratched-out faces turning toward her. She ran, the village blurring around her. The hum was a chorus now, voices overlapping, some human, some not. She saw the robed figures again, standing in doorways, heads tilted as if listening. The path led her to a church, its steeple crooked, its doors open. Inside it was dark, the pews empty, but the air was alive with the hum. On the altar was a mirror, full and unclouded. Mara approached it, unable to stop herself. Her reflection was there, but it wasn't alone. Behind her stood the choir, their faces still hidden, their hands outstretched. She turned, but the church was empty. The mirror showed something else now, a huge form, closer than ever, its edges rippling like water. It had no eyes, but it saw her. It had no mouth, but it sang. The hum became a scream, and Mara's reflection opened its mouth, wider and wider, until it was a void. She smashed the mirror with a candelabra, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. The hum stopped, replaced by a silence so thick it choked her. She ran from the church, from the village, from the path, back into the forest. The trees were different now, their bark etched with faces, their branches forming arches that led nowhere. Mara collapsed, her strength gone. The hum returned, soft and soothing, promising rest. She closed her eyes and the forest disappeared. She was back in the circular room, sitting in the chair, the choir around her. The veiled woman stood by her side, her face a blank. "You cannot run," she said. "The song is in you." Mara opened her mouth to scream, but what came out was a note pure, clear, and not her own. Mara's voice was no longer hers. The note she sang lingered, vibrating in the air, joining the hum of the choir. It was beautiful, perfect, and it frightened her. She closed her mouth, but the sound continued rising from her chest, her bones, her very being. The robed figures swayed, their hands raised, their shadows stretching like fingers across the circular room. The huge form pulsed in the darkness, its presence heavier, closer, feeding on the song. She was still in the chair, her body rigid, her hands gripping the armrests. The veiled woman stood before her, her blank face unreadable. "You resist," she said, her voice a whisper that cut through the hum. "But resistance is temporary. The hollow claims all." Mara tried to speak, to deny it, but her throat betrayed her, letting out another note. The choir responded, their voices swelling, the room shaking. The spirals on the walls glowed, their light seeping into her vision, blurring the edges of reality. She saw things, flashes of other lives, other singers, their faces dissolving into the same void. They were part of the chorus, part of the hollow, their selves erased. She struggled to remember herself. Mara Elise Cantrell, 32. Graphic designer. But the memories faded, replaced by the song. It was endless, eternal, a melody with no beginning and no end. It promised peace, belonging, but at a price she couldn't name. She dug her nails into her palms, the pain grounding her. She had to get out, had to find a way back to the world. The veiled woman tilted her head as if sensing her defiance. "You are not alone," she said. "Others have tried. They sing now." Mara's eyes darted to the robed figures. Were they people once? Had they received letters, been driven to this place, sat in this chair? She saw a flicker of movement, a figure, smaller than the others, hesitated, its hands trembling. It was a crack in the unity of the choir, an opportunity. She focused on the pain in her palms, using it to anchor her thoughts. She stood, her legs shaking, and the choir faltered, its humming stuttering. The veiled woman hissed, her vacant face rippling. Mara took a step, then another, toward the double doors. The choir moved to block her, but the smaller figure stepped aside, creating a gap. Mara ran, the hum following her, the song in her throat fighting to escape. The doors opened into the foyer, the chandeliers flickering wildly. The portraits on the walls were different now, their faces weren't scratched out, but hers, repeated endlessly, her eyes hollow, her mouth open in song. She tore her gaze away and ran for the entrance. Outside the air was cold, the forest waiting. The black car was there, the driver motionless, the door open. Mara ignored it and plunged into the trees. The hum followed, woven into the wind, but it was weaker now, fragmented. She ran until her lungs burned, until the house was a distant shadow. The forest was still wrong, its trees too tall, its shadows too alive, but she felt a spark of hope. She could escape. She had to. She found a stream, its water clear and cold. She knelt, splashed her face, drank deeply. The hum faded, replaced by the sound of rushing water. She looked at her reflection, and it was hers again, tired, frightened, but hers. She laughed, the sound ragged but real. She was still Mara. But the forest was not finished with her. The trees began to hum, their branches swaying in rhythm. The surface of the stream rippled, forming spirals. The chorus was everywhere, in everything. Mara stood, her hope crumbling. She walked, not knowing where, only that she couldn't stop. Hours passed, or days. She found a cave, its entrance hidden by vines. Inside it was dry, quiet, the buzz muffled. She curled up on the stone floor, her body aching. Sleep came, fitful and haunted. She dreamed of the choir, their faces hers, their voices hers. She dreamed of the cave, its emptiness swallowing her whole. When she awoke, the cave was different. The walls were carved with spirals that glowed faintly. In the center was a pool, its water black and still. Mara approached it, drawn despite herself. Her reflection was there, but she wasn't alone. The chorus stood behind her, their faces visible now, her face, again and again, each one slightly off, slightly empty. She turned around, but the cave was empty. The hum returned, louder, sharper, a command. She clamped her hands over her mouth, but the sound escaped, pure and clear. The pool rippled, and something moved beneath the surface, something huge, something hungry. Mara backed away, but the entrance to the cave was gone, sealed with stone. The spirals glowed brighter, the hum became a scream. She was trapped, her voice no longer her own, herself slipping away. The choir's song was her song, and the hollow was waiting. Mara stood before the black pool, the spirals of the cave pulsating like heartbeats. The hum was deafening now, a chorus of voices that weren't hers but knew her, knew every fear, every secret. Her reflection in the pool was a multitude, countless Maras staring back, their eyes hollow, their mouths singing. She tried to look away, but her body wouldn't obey. The psalm was in her, through her, and it was almost complete. The great shape, the hollow, rose from the pool, not water but shadow, its edges fraying like thread. It had no form, yet it was everything: the house, the choir, the forest, the hum. It was absence made manifest, a hunger that had no end. Mara felt it pulling at her, unraveling her thoughts, her memories, herself. She saw flashes of her life, her apartment, her sketches, her mother's smile, but they faded, replaced by the song. She tried to fight it, to hold on to herself, but the song was too strong. It was beautiful in its way, a promise of eternity, of being part of something bigger. But it was a lie. The hollow didn't want her to join, it wanted her to disappear. She saw the faces of the choir again, not her own now, but others, countless others, their selves erased, their voices stolen. The smaller figure from the circular room appeared in her mind, its trembling hands a lifeline. It had resisted, if only for a moment. Mara clung to it, used it to anchor herself. She dug her nails into her arms, the pain sharp and real. She screamed, not a note but a sound, raw and human. The hum faltered, the spirals flickered. The hollow surged, its shadow wrapping around her, cold and heavy. It spoke not in words, but in feelings: loss, despair, inevitability. Mara's knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She remembered the stream, the moment her reflection was hers again. She remembered who she was. "I am Mara," she said, her voice trembling, but hers. "I am not yours." The cave shook, the spirals cracked. The voices of the choir broke, some screaming, some crying. The hollow roared, a sound that wasn't sound but pressure, crushing her from all sides. Mara closed her eyes, imagining the stream, the forest, the world beyond this place. She sang not the choir's song, but her own, an awkward, off-key tune her mother used to hum. The cave shattered, or so it seemed. When Mara opened her eyes, she was in the forest, the trees silent, the humming gone. The sky was clear, stars visible for the first time. She was alone, her robe torn, her body bruised but alive. She walked, following the stars, until she found a road. A truck passed, and the driver stopped when he saw her. He asked questions she couldn't answer. She didn't know where she had been, only that she had escaped. Days later she was home, her apartment unchanged, the city buzzing with life. She told no one, not even Lena. She burned the gray robe, deleted her search history, tried to forget. But at night, when the city was quiet, she heard it, a faint hum, buried in her chest. She ignored it, told herself it was nothing, but her reflection was never quite right, her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. She stopped sketching, stopped leaving her apartment. The hum grew louder, quieter, always there. One night she awoke to find a letter on her nightstand, cream-colored, sealed with a spiral. She didn't open it. She knew what it said. The hollow wasn't finished with her. It would never be. The whispering glass. Clara had always hated mirrors. As a child, she'd covered the one in her bedroom with a sheet, convinced that something was watching her through the glass. Her mother called it a phase, but the unease never left her. At 29, Clara still avoided her reflection, looking away from store windows and bathroom mirrors, her heart racing at the thought of what she might see. So when she found a mirror in the attic of her new house, she should have left it alone. The house was a fixer-upper, a sagging Victorian on the edge of Wren's Hollow, a town so small it barely showed up on maps. Clara bought it cheaply, fleeing the city and a job that had consumed her. The realtor warned her about the attic, cluttered, dusty, possibly unsafe, but Clara was curious. On her third day, she climbed the narrow stairs, flashlight in hand, and found it, a full-length mirror, its frame carved with twisting vines, its glass cloudy but unbroken. The mirror stood alone, leaning against a beam, as if waiting for her. The attic was a mess: boxes, broken furniture, a child's rocking horse with an eye missing, but the mirror was pristine, its surface catching the flashlight's beam and throwing it back in shards. Clara approached, her boots creaking on the floorboards. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of mold and something sharper, like burned sugar. She didn't want to look, but her eyes betrayed her. Her reflection was there, but it wasn't right. The Clara in the glass was pale, her eyes too big, her mouth a thin line that didn't match the frown she felt. She stepped back, and the reflection didn't move. It stared unblinking, until Clara turned away, her breath shallow. She told herself it was a trick of the light, the glass warped by age. But as she descended the stairs, she heard it, a whisper, faint and formless, like wind through dry leaves. It was coming from the attic, from the mirror. Clara locked the attic door and pushed a chair against it. She spent the evening unpacking, blasting music to drown out the silence, but the whispering lingered in her mind. She Googled the history of the house and found nothing but a brief mention of its original owner, a man named Elias Varn, who disappeared in 1897. No photos, no records, just a note that he had been a recluse, rumored to have collected oddities. Clara shivered at the thought of the mirror. She dreamed of the attic that night. The mirror was larger, its frame pulsating like a living thing. Her reflection stood in it, beckoning, its mouth moving in words she couldn't hear. When she awoke, her bedroom mirror, small, inevitable, was uncovered, though she was sure she'd draped a towel over it. Her reflection stared back at her, her eyes wrong, her smile too wide. She threw the towel back on and didn't sleep again. In the morning, Clara decided to get rid of the attic mirror. She called a local junk dealer, but the line went dead in mid-sentence. She tried a neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Hale, who answered in a quavering voice. "Don't touch them," Mrs. Hale said. "Varn's things, they don't go away." Before Clara could ask more, the call was cut off. Clara didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in her fear. She armed herself with a crowbar and climbed up to the attic, determined to smash the mirror and be done with it. The door was unlocked, the chair gone. The attic was colder now, the air sharp in her lungs. The mirror stood where she'd left it, but the tendrils on its frame seemed different, their curves tighter, more like veins. She raised the crowbar, but the whispering returned, louder, clearer. It wasn't one voice, but many, overlapping, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. The glass rattled, and her reflection appeared, not Clara, but a man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, his mouth open in a silent scream. Clara dropped the crowbar and stumbled back. The whispers grew, filling the attic, her head, her chest. They weren't just sounds, they were alive, crawling under her skin. She ran, slamming the attic door, but the whispers followed, seeping through the walls. Downstairs, every reflective surface windows, the kettle, her phone screen showed the man's face, his eyes locked on hers. Clara covered her eyes, curled up on the couch, but the whispers didn't stop. They spoke her name, over and over, until it wasn't her name anymore, but something older, something that belonged to the glass. When the whispers stopped, Clara opened her eyes. The house was quiet, but the air felt different, heavier. She stood, her legs unsteady, and noticed a crack in the living room window. It hadn't been there before. Through the crack she saw her reflection, but it wasn't hers. It was the man, his hand pressed against the glass, his mouth forming her name. Clara screamed, and the house answered a low, resonant hum that shook the walls. Clara didn't leave the house for days. She covered every mirror, every window with sheets and tape, turning her home into a patchwork cave. The whispers didn't stop, though they came at night, soft and insistent, weaving through her dreams. They spoke in fragments, words she almost understood, promising things she didn't want. She unplugged her phone, afraid of what she'd see on the screen, and kept the lights off, hoping the darkness would hide her from whatever was watching. The house felt alive, its walls creaking, its shadows moving when she wasn't looking. She found scratches on the attic door, thin and deliberate, like fingernails. She didn't go up there, but sometimes she heard footsteps, slow and heavy, walking above her head. The hum from that first night returned, faint but constant, vibrating in her teeth. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, pressing against her, waiting. Clara tried to leave once. She packed a bag, grabbed her keys, and made it to the front door. But the doorknob wouldn't turn and the windows wouldn't open. Her reflection in the glass showed the man again, his face closer, his eyes black pits. The whispers rose, a chorus of voices, and Clara dropped her bag and retreated to the couch. The house didn't want her to leave. She survived on canned food, her appetite gone. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mirror, its frame pulsing, its glass rippling. She saw the man Elias Varn. She was sure his face etched in her mind. She needed answers, but the internet was useless without her phone, and the library was a mile away, unreachable through the grip of the house. On the 5th day, she found a book. It was under the couch, leather-bound, its cover embossed with the same vine-like pattern as the mirror's frame. She hadn't seen it before, hadn't brought it with her. The pages were brittle, filled with handwritten notes in a jagged script. It was a diary, dated 1896, signed by Elias Varn. Clara's hands trembled as she read. Varn wrote of the glass, a mirror he'd found in an abandoned church, its frame carved by hands he couldn't trace. He called it a window, not to another place, but to the between, a realm of voices that sang without sound. He was obsessed, spending nights staring into it, transcribing the whispers. The journal became erratic, the writing wilder. He described faces in the glass, not his own, but others, people he'd known, people he'd lost. They spoke to him, begged him, cursed him. The last entry was a single line. "The glass is hungry." Clara closed the book, her heart pounding. The whispers returned, louder, calling her name. She stood, clutching the diary, and noticed something new, a crack in the wall, cobwebbed from the attic door. It hadn't been there yesterday. She approached, drawn despite herself, and pressed her ear to the door. The hum was louder, joined by a wet, scraping sound, like something dragging itself across the floor. She didn't want to go upstairs, but the diary was incomplete, and the answers were in the attic. She grabbed a kitchen knife, more for courage than defense, and climbed the stairs. The attic was darker now, the air thick with the smell of burnt sugar. The mirror stood untouched, its glass clear, reflecting a room that wasn't the attic, a stone chamber, its walls carved with faces, their mouths open in silent screams. Clara's reflection was there, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood figures, shadowy and indistinct, their heads tilted, their hands outstretched. She turned, but the attic was empty. The whispers grew, speaking in unison. Look! See! Become! The knife slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. She wanted to run, but her feet moved forward, toward the mirror. The glass was cold under her fingers, rippling like water. The figures in the reflection became clearer, men, women, children, their faces pale, their eyes empty. They wore clothes from different eras, but their expressions were the same: fear, resignation, hunger. Clara saw Elias Varn among them, his gaunt face unmistakable, his mouth moving in words she couldn't hear. She pulled her hand back, but the glass clung to her fingers sinking into it. The whisper became a scream, and the frame of the mirror pulsed, the vines writhing like snakes. Clara tore herself free and fell to the floor, her hand burning. She crawled to the stairs, the hum following her, the faces in the glass watching. Downstairs, she barricaded the attic door with a bookcase, but the whispers seeped through, relentless. The cracks in the walls spread, forming patterns: vines, faces, eyes. Clara clutched the journal, rereading it, searching for a way out. Varn had written of a ritual, a way to close the glass, but the pages were torn, the instructions gone. The house shook, the hum a roar. Clara looked at the covered windows, and through a gap in the tape she saw her reflection. It wasn't her, not anymore. It was Elias Varn, his hand waving, his mouth forming her name. Clara did not sleep. She couldn't, not with the whispers curling through the house, not with the cracks in the walls spreading like veins. The diary lay open on the coffee table, its pages yellowed, its words a mockery. Elias Varn had known something, had tried to fight the mirror, but he'd failed. Clara wasn't sure if she could do any better, but she had to try. The alternative was surrender, and the faces in the glass, their empty eyes, their hungry mouths promised a fate worse than death. The house was no longer hers. The air was heavy, the shadows too thick, gathering in corners where light should have reached. The hum was constant, a low pulse that synced with her heartbeat, making her feel like an extension of the house, the mirror, the thing behind it. She tried to break the windows, pry open the doors, but they held, the glass unyielding, the wood unnaturally strong. Her reflection was everywhere, even in the matte surfaces of pots and spoons, showing Elias Varn's face, or worse, her own, distorted and false. She read the journal again, looking for clues. Varn had described the mirror as a door opened by blood and closed by will. He tried to destroy it, burn it, smash it, but it always came back, whole and waiting. He wrote of the voices, how they grew stronger the longer he listened, how they knew things, secrets, fears, truths he'd buried. The last pages mentioned a name. The chorus, a force that lived in the glass, fed by those who looked too long. Clara's hands shook as she read. The whispers were louder now, chanting, "Look! Connect! Sing!" She covered her ears, but the sound was inside her, vibrating in her skull. The cracks in the walls now formed faces, their mouths moving in sync with the whispers. She saw them in the grain of the wood, the plaster, the ceiling, eyes watching, lips curling. The house was alive, and it wanted her. She needed to go to the attic, to face the mirror, but fear kept her there. Instead, she searched the house, rifling through closets, cabinets, anywhere Varn might have left answers. In the basement, she found a box, its lid carved with vines. Inside were dozens of photographs, faded and curled, of people standing in front of mirrors. Their faces were scratched out, their hands pressed against the glass. On the back of each was a date, a name, and a single word. Taken. Clara recognized one name, Margaret Hale, dated 1923. Mrs. Hale, the neighbor who'd warned her. She was younger in the photo, her face intact, her eyes wide with terror. Clara's stomach churned. She dug deeper and found a letter, its paper brittle, addressed to the next. It was from Varn, written in haste. If you are reading this, the glass has chosen you. It will not let you go. The refrain sings through the mirror, through the house, through you. Do not look. Do not listen. Find the ritual, the one I failed. Blood opens, will closes. Burn this house if you must, but do not let it take you. The letter ended abruptly, the ink smudged. Clara clutched it, her hope flickering. There was a way out, a ritual, but she didn't know it. The whispers rose, mocking her, and the hum grew louder, shaking the floor. She ran upstairs, the basement door slamming behind her. The cracks were everywhere now, the faces clearer, their mouths forming her name. She had no choice. She moved the bookshelf, opened the attic door, and climbed up. The air was freezing, the smell of burnt sugar overwhelming. The mirror stood in the center of the attic, its glass glowing faintly, reflecting the stone chamber with its carved faces. Clara's reflection was there, but she wasn't alone. The figures from before were closer, their faces visible now, not Varn, not Margaret, but others, their eyes black, their mouths open in song. The whispers became a chorus, deafening, commanding. Look! Join! Become! Clara's hand moved, reaching for the glass, but she stopped herself and grabbed the letter instead. She read Varn's words aloud, her voice trembling. Blood opens, will closes. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt the pull of the mirror, its hunger. She slashed her palm with the knife, blood dripping to the floor. The mirror shook, the glass rattled, the figures screamed. Clara pressed her bloody hand against the glass, wanting it to break, to close, to end. The whispers turned to screams, the hum to a roar. The figures in the glass lunged, their hands breaking through, cold and gray, grabbing at her wrists. Clara pulled away, but they were strong, their touch burning. She saw their faces, her face, endlessly repeated, each one emptier than the last. She screamed, her voice hers for a moment, and the mirror cracked, a single line splitting the glass. The figures disappeared, the whispers faded, but the hum remained, fainter but alive. Clara fell to the floor, her hand bleeding, her body shaking. The mirror was still there, cracked but whole, watching. She crawled downstairs and barricaded the attic again. The house was quiet, but the cracks in the walls were still watching, still whispering. Clara knew it wasn't over. The choir was waiting, and the mirror was patient. Clara lived in fragments. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the whispers that never stopped, the hum that pulsed through the house. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, her body sustained by fear and despair. The crack in the mirror hadn't weakened her, it had enraged her. The choir, whatever it was closer now, its voices sharper, its presence a weight in her chest. The house was a prison, its walls alive with faces, its shadows singing. She kept the journal and Varn's letter close to her, rereading them until the words blurred. Blood opens, will closes. She tried blood, but her will wasn't enough. The ritual was incomplete, and the mirror knew it. She saw it in her dreams, a vast, formless thing behind the glass, not a creature but a void, fed by the voices it stole. It had taken Varn, Margaret, countless others, and now it wanted her. The cracks in the walls spread, forming a network of vines and eyes that watched her every move. She found more photographs, hidden in drawers, under floorboards, each one showing a new face, a new victim. Some were recent, their clothes modern, their eyes filled with the same terror she felt. The choir didn't just live in the mirror, it lived in the house, the town, the glass itself. Wren's Hollow was its domain, and Clara was its prey. She tried to burn the house once, pouring gasoline into the living room, but the matches wouldn't light, the air too heavy, the whispers laughing. She tried to smash the windows again, but they healed, the glass reformed before her eyes. The doors remained locked, the phone dead, the world outside unreachable. She was trapped, and the choir was patient. Clara returned to the attic, driven by the need to understand. The mirror stood, its crack glowing faintly, its glass reflecting the stone chamber. The figures were there, closer, their faces now hers, their mouths singing her name. She didn't look for long, afraid of what she had become. Instead, she searched the attic, rifling through boxes, finding more of Varn's things: a locket with a woman's portrait, a knife with a vine-carved handle, a map of Wren's Hollow, its streets marked with spirals. The map led to the church Varn had mentioned, where he'd found the mirror. Clara knew this was her only chance. She waited for dawn, hoping that daylight would weaken the chorus, and pried open a basement window. The glass shattered, and for a moment she was free. She ran, the city silent, its houses empty, their windows dark. The church stood at the edge of town, its steeple crooked, its doors ajar. Inside it was cold, the air thick with dust and the smell of burned sugar. The pews were broken, the altar bare, but at the back was a door, its frame carved with vines. Clara opened it, revealing a staircase that led down into the darkness. The hum was louder here, the whispers a chorus, welcoming her. She grabbed Varn's knife, her hands still bleeding, and went down. The stairs ended in a chamber, its walls covered with mirrors, dozens, hundreds, their frames pulsing, their glass rippling. In the center was a pool, its water black and still, reflecting the light of the mirrors. Clara's reflection was everywhere, but it wasn't hers. It was the chorus, their faces hers, Varn's, Margaret's, countless others, their mouths open in song. The whispering became a scream. Sing! Merge! Become! Clara's hand moved, raising the knife, but she stopped herself, driving it into the floor instead. The mirrors shook, the pool rippled, the chorus screamed. She knelt, pressed her bloody hand to the pool, willed the ritual to work. The water burned, the mirrors shattered, and the figures in the glass lunged, their hands breaking through, grabbing her. Clara fought, her will stronger now, fueled by anger. She saw Varn's face, Margaret's, their eyes pleading, not for her, but for themselves. They were trapped, their voices stolen, their selves erased. Clara screamed, not a song but a defiance, and the pool exploded, water and glass flying, the mirrors shattering. The chamber collapsed, or so it seemed. When Clara opened her eyes, she was outside, the church in ruins, the city silent. The map was gone, the knife broken, but she was alive. She ran, not looking back, until she reached the highway. A truck stopped, its driver staring at her bloody hand, her torn clothes. She didn't explain, couldn't. Back in town, Clara tried to forget. She sold the house from afar, never to return to Wren's Hollow. But the whispers followed, faint but persistent, in her dreams, in her reflections. She covered her mirrors, avoided glass, but it wasn't enough. The chorus was patient, and it knew her name. Clara thought she had escaped. The city was loud, alive, its chaos a shield against the silence of Wren's Hollow. She rented a small apartment, its walls bare, its mirrors removed. She found a new job, designing logos from home, avoiding clients, avoiding reflections. But the choir wasn't gone. It lived inside her, a low hum in her chest, a whisper in her dreams. She saw it in the edges of her vision, faces in windows, eyes in the shine of a spoon, mouths forming her name. She didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? The house was sold, the city a memory, but the diary haunted her. She'd kept it, hidden in a drawer, its pages a reminder of Varn's failure, her own near surrender. She read it sometimes, searching for answers, but the words were the same: blood opens, will closes. She had tried, and it had not been enough. The refrain was eternal, and she was marked. The apartment wasn't safe. Cracks appeared in the walls, thin at first, then wider, forming vines, eyes, mouths. She covered them with paint, but they returned, whispering her name. Her reflection was wrong, even in the matte surfaces of her laptop, her coffee cup. It was her face, but not her eyes, too dark, too empty. She stopped looking, but the choir didn't need her to look. It saw her. She tried to leave the city, booked a bus ticket, but the glass doors of the station showed her reflection, not hers, but Varn's, his hand beckoning. The whispers grew louder, and Clara ran home and locked herself in. The apartment shook, the humming a roar, the cracks in the walls bleeding a black, viscous liquid. She knew what it was: the pool, the mirror, the chorus reaching for her. Clara burned the journal, hoping to break the connection, but the flames didn't touch it. The pages glowed, the vines on the cover twisted. She threw it in the sink, but the next morning it was on her desk, open to a new page. The writing was hers, though she hadn't written it. You are the glass. You are the song. Sing. She didn't want to sing, but her throat betrayed her. A note escaped, pure and clear. The apartment responded, the cracks pulsating, the shadows singing. Clara put her hands over her mouth, but the note continued, joined by others, a chorus of voices that weren't hers. She saw them in the walls, the ceiling, the floor, faces, hands, eyes, all hers, all not. She ran to the bathroom, the only room without cracks, and locked the door. The mirror was gone, but the faucet on the sink gleamed, showing her reflection. It was the choir, their faces overlapping, their mouths open in song. Clara smashed the faucet with a wrench, water splashing, but the reflection remained clearer, closer. The hum was deafening, the whisper a command. Become. Clara's will broke. She saw Varn's face, Margaret's, her own, all part of the chorus, their voices one. She saw the void behind the glass, its hunger endless, its song eternal. She wanted to fight, but the note in her throat grew, filling her, obliterating her. She remembered her childhood, her fear of mirrors, her mother's laughter, but they faded, replaced by the song. She opened the bathroom door, the apartment a maze of cracks and shadows. The journal lay on the floor, its pages now blank, its cover pulsing. Clara picked it up, her hands moving without her consent. She walked to the window, the glass uncovered, reflecting the city, the choir, herself. She pressed her hand against it, the glass rippling, her reflection smiling. The ritual had not failed, it had changed her. Blood opened, will closed, but the choir was her will now. She sang not a note, but a chorus, her voice joining countless others. The apartment dissolved, or so it seemed. When Clara opened her eyes, she was in the stone chamber, the mirrors whole, the pool glowing. The chorus was there, their faces hers, their song complete. She was home. Months later, a new tenant moved into Clara's apartment. They found a mirror in the closet, its frame carved with vines, its glass cloudy but unbroken. They hung it on the wall and admired its antique charm. That night they heard a whisper, faint and formless, like wind through dry leaves. They didn't cover it up. They didn't know. The chorus was patient, and it knew their name.